Welcome to Dear Asian Americans. I am your host, Jerry Wan. Wherever you are in the world and whatever you might be going through, we wish you health, safety, and sanity, making sure that you are healthy and safe, both physically, emotionally, and mentally, as we go through these challenging times together. Um, really excited for our guest today, who you may have seen on TV. I must say that by the time he came on Supernatural, I was out of the age target demographic, so I discovered him in different ways. Um, but it's interesting, I think, to get a completely different perspective that we have not heard yet of somebody who has played numerous roles across a number of different TV shows and movies. So super excited and humbled to have Osric Chau on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Jerry. Really happy to be here. I love what you're doing with this podcast. I wish I heard about it sooner.
Well, we've only been around 5 weeks. We just happen to have a lot of content because all we got is time right now. So you're not too far behind, and really glad you're here, man.
That's awesome. Yeah, you also have a very lovely radio voice, so which makes sense that you're doing this.
It's thank you, number one. I've heard that for a long time, and friends would always chime in and be like, "You also have a face for radio." However, that's landed me here into using my voice to help our stories. Um, so, slight pivot. I guess those of you who are more of technical junkies. This I can't rename the show "Dear Asian Canadian," so we're going to stick with the title of the show. But you, you are
I got my
technically
now.
well, you live here now, so that's good. We'll get by on that. So tell us about Osric in his early years. How did your family move to Canada? And share with us a little bit about your childhood memories.
Man, I think this is a common theme with a lot of Asian Americans, or maybe it's just me, but I don't know that much about my parents going to Canada. Like, they don't really share much about their past or history. And even now, we're learning all of these things about my parents. And I have to make it a conscious thought to sit them down, ask them questions, and ask them probably 4 or 5 times before I get a decent answer. And so this last trip, last year, I was in Canada, and this little nugget of information crept out of my mom's mouth, and I learned that my parents met in Canada. But I also learned that my mom knew my dad, like she knew of my dad in Malaysia because she grew up in a tiny town of like 2,000 people in Malaysia. And she's like, "Oh yeah, like I used to see your dad when he was waiting for the bus because he went to university in my hometown." And I'm like, "I did not know that." So let me get this straight. You knew of him when you were 18, and then you met like years later on, I think when you were 30 in Canada through some random introduction, and like you never thought to tell any of us that. Like that's a huge bit of information. It's just like little nuggets like that. Like I didn't know. When my grandpa died, that's when I found out he wasn't my biological grandpa. And it was because my mom was officially adopted by her neighbor, and that's the grandpa that we grew up with. And so she didn't want us to treat him not like her actual grandpa. Not that, like, even now I still think of him as my real grandpa. But what that did was it caused all of what caused me and my brothers to treat maybe our real grandma and all of these random aunts who are actually my mom's sisters more like strangers than family. And it was just like this weird thing that kind of happens. And my family is surrounded by so much secrecy, so growing up we actually didn't know too much about like our past and who we were and what we were supposed to be. So a lot of who we are was actually created by the media and what we were told that we were. And so I was absolutely affected by the media. That being said, I was kind of a stupid kid, and so I never really thought about all of these things and how it affected me. And so, one of my earliest thoughts was like wishing to grow up someday and be a white guy, right? And it wasn't even like, oh, that's a weird thing to wish for. It was like, no, like I want to be a cool guy, and like all these cool guys on TV are white dudes, right? I don't want to be like one of those delivery boys on that you see. And it was such a weird thing when I grew up and thought about that it occurred to me that it was a strange, weird thought, and then it led to like why, and that's when I really started getting into the identity issue for Asian Americans.
I don't think you're alone in the frustrations of not knowing enough about our past. I think a part of it is our parents' desire to eliminate or decrease the negativity as they perceive it of, we're not going to bring this pain into your life. We just want to create a clear path for you. Not necessarily realizing that we yearn for that. We need that to help us. You got to know where you're from to help figure out where you're going. And so I don't think you are alone. Certainly I'm in that bucket of learning new things as the years go by, and also trying to make sense of why wasn't I told this. And it's kind of cool. And um, it's funny because I think, on TV, you see things for like, oh, get your DNA test and figure out where your family's from. Well, for us, it's a little bit different, right? Like we know exactly where we're from regionally. It's like one place, but we miss the context of who the stories were. So, um, and like the media representation stuff, that's like the whole reason why we're doing stuff like this, right? Like, let's change the narrative. Let's put the positive stories of the people that we know that exist. Um, so coming from an Asian Canadian Asian American family, were you pressured to go more into academia because you chose a different path early on to pursue something to do with acting and with martial arts?
Yeah, I mean, all my entire family, like my dad has 7 siblings, and 6 of them, including my dad, 7. Them and their entire like families, kids of kids, they're all in Vancouver, and so in our family we have doctors, we have like RCMP officers, we have lawyers, we have almost everyone was a piano teacher at some point. Like we have like the very stereotypical, a bunch of accountants, a bunch of the stereotypical like safe jobs. And the job that was kind of designated for me because we didn't have one in the family yet was an optometrist. And because I was the only one in my family that needed glasses, my mom's like, "Well, you can give yourself a discount for contacts and all that." And that's the only reason. Um, and so that was a path designated for me. But me and my brother is kind of our generation and below we became this kind of a black sheep in the family because none of us went that path. And at first, like they used to have meetings with all the aunts and uncles. They're super worried about us. Like, oh man, like these kids, what are they gonna do? Like how's it gonna work out? Um, and for me, like I lucked out. One, my brother was kind of the bad egg, and so everything he did, like it just made everything that I did look amazing, no matter how bad I was. Right, so I had that going for me. And two, my mom was super active in just trying to get us out into as many extracurricular activities as we could, and acting just happened to be one of those activities. And so it was kind of an accident, but she got me into it because she thought like, oh, this is like acting classes. It's soccer, it's basketball, it's just another activity that will like introduce my kids to something else. Also, it was free, so of course I'm going to sign you up for it. So it just happened to be one of those activities that I could we didn't know how to quit, right? So like I quit cadets, I quit basketball, I quit soccer, I quit everything. But when I had an agent, I could quit one audition, but like they'd call me back in a month or 2 months, and they may like, okay, well I guess I'll go in this time. There was no quitting. I didn't really know how to do it. And so by the time I graduated high school and I was in college, and of course they're pushing me, get your degree, get your degree. I just hated studying so much. And the only exit strategy that I saw was in the arts, because if I got a job as an actor or a stuntman, that means I could take the semester off. Yeah, school in Canada is quite cheap. I think it was like $1,000 a year for me, and so if I worked a day as a stuntman or as an actor, that would pay for the whole year. I'm like, well, mom, it doesn't make sense. Like it's during exam time. I just have to take off this year, and so I would do that, and it just motivated me so much to work at acting and stunts. I'm like, oh my god, if I do this right, I can just like keep pushing off school. And at some point, it just clicked. I'm like, well, I'm actually doing pretty good on this thing. Maybe I should just like make this my thing. Like I don't mind doing it, and I can't like. There's an end date, so I don't even have to quit the job. Even if I hate the job, it's going to end at some point, and then I just find a new job. And I just found myself really enjoying interviewing for work, getting the job, going through the training, and then like looking forward to the end, knowing that it's going to come at some point. I think the idea that something would last forever would it just drove me crazy. And there was a point where I realized that me and my parents have very different values. Like my dad loves the idea of knowing when the next paycheck's going to come, that security, the stability. And for me, I'm like, well, dad, like I love knowing that my next paycheck could be $1 million, but it could also be nothing for like 5 years. Like I love that. And for him, he's scared. So
How old were you when you discovered acting? I guess uh, thanks to your mom in a way.
it was actually thanks to both of them. So my dad, he bought the first computer that could translate English and Chinese,
Huh.
and one of his first clients was an actress who needed a script translated. And so she got my dad to do it. The project fell through. She couldn't pay for it. She's like, I didn't get paid for the job, but I do teach acting classes. I can teach your kids. And so my mom jumped at that. And so all of us went in.
Wow. And was acting part of your growing up through high school? Were you in the school plays? Did you do stuff in addition to the academic pursuit?
Uh, yeah, but it wasn't, it was just another activity again. Like, so that first class, I was 9 years old. So I've been in
Wow.
it for
Okay.
a while. And I did a couple of things here and there, but nothing, like, I never really considered myself an actor. Like, it was just something that I did. And the moment where I thought, I'm like, hey, maybe I'm not actually that bad at it, because I've taken a lot of acting classes at that point, and I was always the worst, like by far the worst actor, because I just didn't really care. I never really put my all. I just showed up because my mom dropped me off, right? And everyone else wanted to be there. But high school senior year, there was the school plays, and my girlfriend at the time really wanted to be an actress,
Hmm.
and so she forced me to go audition with her, and I ended up being the lead actor in The Crucible. So I played John Proctor. There's two casts, and I was the only character who played both, who was in both casts, and so it was a huge, heavy role for my first time. And actually, a lot of people got pretty upset because I never did any play up until that point, and all of a sudden I'm the lead character. Um, but I thought I did a pretty good job. I was one of the only people that memorized all of their lines, and I had the most. So I took it seriously, and I was kind of frustrated because if I'm doing something, I'm going to take it seriously.
Right.
And because it's high school and not everyone was fully committed to it, it just really bothered me. So I never really, like, it didn't win me over, but for myself, I'm like, okay, I can do this.
That's
Right.
cool.
But it didn't make me want to do it again.
That's cool. I mean, so you alluded to it earlier, and I guess for folks who followed your career, you initially started in the stunt world.
Hmm.
I'm curious to know why that decision was chosen and how much of and I guess early in the conversation, we also talked about representation in media, right? And so the desire for you, Osric, to be on screen or at least provide some sort of representative figure on screen. Um, why stunts and why through martial arts?
Because the only representation I had growing up that was at all Asian was, Jackie
Hmm.
Chan, Jet Li, right? And so those were my idols growing up. I watch all their movies. I'm like, okay, if I have a chance at doing anything nearly as cool that is to my background, it's martial arts. And so I've been asking all my brothers, we've been asking, like, sign us up for Taekwondo, karate classes, whatever, always way too expensive. But one day my mom found this guy in the Chinese newspaper teaching free kung fu classes in the park. Uh, so so we went, and it was wushu, which is a very traditional but performance style martial art, with this coach that just came in from China, and he was teaching people for free in the park. And this was not taekwondo, it wasn't karate, it wasn't, like, we're not fighting. But me and my brother, like my younger brother specifically, we just got obsessed. And like that, we started at the end of a school year, and so that first summer we did two classes every single day. Like, we were obsessed with it, because just the idea that we could get better and good at something. I don't know what it was, but our minds just clicked. And at that point, I'm like, okay, well, I can see myself being like a martial arts coach. Like, I could be a teacher someday. I could be the best in the world at this if I really tried. And like, we just fully bought into that sport and the whole community. And like, I loved it. It was such a weird place in my life where all we did was train. But it definitely was a huge part of my upbringing.
And the transition from college years, and it sounds like you did acting throughout college and mixed it in. It wasn't, jumping off point. Um, when did it become serious enough for you to call it? And when when you met somebody for the first time, it's like, "Hey, Osric, what do you do?" "I'm an actor." When did that become clear for you?
For a while, I always considered myself a stuntman that could kind
Hmm.
of act. my agent thought I was an actor. And then when he found out I could do my own stunts, he flipped out. And then I got my first big job. He represents mostly Asians. Everyone has kung fu on their resume, and he's like, "No one's this good." And he, and sure enough, he got me a job within like three months as a lead because I could do my own stunts. So that was a huge job. But in my mind, it was still like, "Oh, I won the lottery. It was great."
Hmm.
But back to real life, go back to school, find some day job that I'm probably going to hate. And I did like a year of just applying to jobs, getting a job, and then walking away after 3 days because it was driving me crazy. So I did a year of like 20, 30 different jobs like that.
Huh.
And then I finally booked another big job. And it was a movie called 2012. It's this big disaster movie. And it was massive. And I could not appreciate the scale of it at the time. I think to this day, it's still the biggest film that was ever shot in Vancouver. And when the movie came out, like, again, like I had no idea. I thought I was, I'm like a small character in this big movie. Like my website crashed, like everything, like just like went overload. We had like all this fan mail. All of a sudden, I'm like, what is this? And it just kind of like launched my career in a way that I never really foresaw because to me, it was also like I won the lottery again.
Yeah.
But after the movie came out, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this for real. And I'm just gonna say, look, if it doesn't work out, I'm just gonna sleep on the street, and I'm okay with that. Like I couldn't see myself doing anything else. I'm like, I tried all these other things and I hated them all. I don't hate this as much, so let's explore.
Your big break, you said, film was in your hometown, and to put it all into context, you come from a very large family with lots of uncles, lots of aunts, dozens of cousins, and they're all accomplished and they have this very specific narrow path sort of predestined for you. And I'm sure there was a lot of discussions, like you said, family meetings over what are we going to do with these boys. What was your family's reaction to, I guess, two parts? One, while you were working on the film, because it was home and they, I'm assuming, knew about what you were doing. And then just what you shared with me now of, holy crap, this is real. Osric is like a big deal now.
This is the weird thing, because like you kind of assume that like they know, but no one really talks about it. In that time, it still wasn't that big of a deal. Like in their networks, it doesn't mean anything. So what they wanted for me, like, all right, you're a good looking kid, you're very talented, you can do all this stuff. Like you should go and join this competition. It's called the Sunshine Boys. You could be a Sunshine Boy, and you can win you could be a TVB like star. And that was the last thing that I wanted to be, was a TVB star. And that was their thing. Like, well, if you want to make it, like you have to go where the roles are, where Asian people exist. That's TVB, and we watch it every day. And so they were really excited at that prospect. But to me, it was like, no, like that is not who I am. And I kind of came to that consensus that I'm like, one, I don't want to be called the Sunshine Boy. That just doesn't sound very cool to me. And two, like, I don't know, like Hong Kong in my mind was never really a path, but it just coincided with the 2010 Olympics. So Vancouver had the Olympics in 2010, and the film industry was shutting down for 6 months. So knowing that, my film just came out and I was ready to work, but the film industry was going to shut down for half a year. I'm like, no, I just don't want to accept it. So I ended up moving to China right before the Olympics came out. And, sure enough, like I went where the Asian roles were in Asia. Right. And I ended up doing this Chinese movie. I had it was a supporting role in this Chinese movie. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. But the funny thing is, when I was telling my parents and my family about 2012, I'm like, oh my God, like I'm working with John Cusack, like Danny Glover was here. I was just having lunch with Woody Harrelson. Like, this is crazy. And they're like, who dat? Right. I'm like, okay, all right. And then like I call my parents. I'm like, hey, like I got a movie. I'm working on a movie in China, and it's with Andy Lau and Gong Li. It's like a small part though. My family went crazy. Like when it came out, they bought out a theater for it. Like it's not the greatest film. I still haven't seen it, but they went crazy for it. And that was the project that like really like justified everything I ever did. It's like, okay, he's fine now because of this tiny little part in this movie with some people they know.
It's all context, right? Like in the Korean American community, we joke, right? Like, I don't care what you do, unless the Korea Times writes about you, you're a nobody, right? Like that's the validation point of
Yeah.
something that our parents can understand of, holy crap, it's a big deal in our world. I think that's crazy, man. It's, you could, we talk to so many friends who are very well accomplished, and our parents or our friends or their friends don't really start to believe or accept or validate our success until something that is real in their world happens. And you're like, really? You need that for you to believe that I was an actor? That's wild. Man, that's cool. So most people know you from your, recurring role that started, in Supernatural. How did that happen? Because I think it's also a lesson for folks who are interested in acting or want to pursue a path. You made strategic decisions to go where the action was, right? There is a difference and a balance between I'm good, so the money, the roles, the attention will come to me, and the humility and the foresight and the strategy to go where, in essence, the money is, for you to eat some humble pie and go do some other stuff. And I guess for us it's particularly fascinating because, like you said, we when we go to Asia to do things, at least visually we fit in. Culturally is a whole different conversation, but at least we're not stereotyped into pigeonholed weird roles.
I think, I mean, that yeah, that's a loaded answer that I have coming for you. Um, I grew up as the Chinese kid. I was in French immersion, so we were very lucky that we had a very diverse class. But I represented China. Me and a couple kids, we represented China. So I, thinking I was the Chinese kid, went to China thinking, oh yeah, going back to my people. Um, but first thing you land, you spend an hour in China. I'm like, oh my god, I'm so Canadian. Like I'm like this is not like who I thought I was. And this goes down the line of like my parents really didn't like they just told me that kids in China couldn't eat, so I had to finish my food. That was like
Oh my
the
god.
extent of what I knew of China. And so, like, really understanding and seeing the culture, like, it was such a big learning experience. And I can't really say it was that strategic because I'm like, okay, well, if there's no work in Canada, then go somewhere else, right? That, like, it wasn't really that strategic. I had a lot, most of my friends didn't leave. And I eventually convinced a couple of them to go because I'm like, hey, it's like the wild, wild west here. We can make our own, right? And it was a really cool thing. And people eventually came. And I think to that end, my mentality of like, I'm not afraid of taking chances. And this is the thing that I actually really, I have to thank for myself in terms of putting myself in a position to succeed is not because I'm good at strategy. It's just that I'm not afraid of falling flat on my face.
Mm.
Right. So I had a couple of huge moments in my life where I just like took a major chance. And looking back, I'm like, you know what? In hindsight, the bigger chance was not taking that chance
Mm.
because I would have failed. Right. And so going to China was a big one because I didn't speak Chinese at that point. I didn't know anyone. I had no idea where I was going to live, let alone what I was going to do. Like it was so crazy, but I did it. And then when I was in China and I ended up moving there and staying there for much longer than I thought, I had an audition for a role in LA. And it was a callback, and I had to spend all of my money to buy a flight to LA. Found a friend to crash on their couch on for like a month, and they agreed, thankfully, for a chance of getting this role. Ended up getting that role, right? But like even that thought, it's like, okay, like we want to see you in LA, but we're not going to fly you there. So do you, you know,
Mm.
literally give up everything for a chance? And so I did. And then there was for Supernatural, I actually had to change my flight, and again, it was another one of those things. I'm like, can I just send in a tape? Like, and I'm already like up for this other role. So I was up for two roles. I had the Supernatural audition, and then I had the series regular for J.J. Abrams pilot.
Mm.
And I'm like, look, it's a callback for this big role and like just a producer director session for a guest star. I'm like, why do I need to go? And my agent's like, well, it'd be good because it's not all the time you get to see producer and a director in a session in Vancouver. So you should change your flight. And at the time, again, it was like all of my money to change a flight for one day, but but I did it. I'm like, okay, I'll take my agent's advice, change my flight. It was a $600 audition. And I did that one, went to LA, did the other one. I got offers for both, but I couldn't do both. And I ended up choosing the bigger one, of course. I'm like, look, that one has a higher chance of blowing it up. And
Right.
if I lose on this one, like I can get there again. Ended up working out in my favor. The other one didn't go through, and I ended up doing Supernatural. But like, I always took the chance, knowing that I could figure it out if I needed to. 2 years ago, I did my first feature film with my roommate, with a couple of friends, and same thing. We bought one-way flights with no money to go to the Philippines to make a movie. Right? Like, we don't, we barely know how to make a movie, let alone like we raised. Like, it was so crazy, but we ended up raising the money within 2 weeks of getting to Manila. And I think the entire time, like, I'm just looking back, I'm like, man, all of my best decisions in my life on paper have been the most insane. And I think it's because somewhere in the back of my head, I remind myself that I have the ability to adapt. I'm a human being, and if I get cold, I'm gonna know to put on a jacket, and if I get hot, I'm gonna know that I got to take it off. Like, I don't know it until I know, but I have the feeling that I'm gonna be able to figure it out in some way, shape, or form, because I'm not the type of person that's just gonna curl up on the floor and die. Right. And so, knowing that of myself, I have to push myself out there. I have to put myself out of the comfort zone so I can go and reach those heights. And it's the same with my parents. I don't need that validation before I will allow myself the permission to try and do something that no one else has done. I'm okay with being first. My parents are not okay with being first. Right. And I think that's the difference in our values and our mentality. And for me, like, yeah, I didn't have that many role models growing up, but I'm thinking, like, man, if I'm waiting for someone to be that role model for me, someone's going to be waiting for me to be that role model for them. So I just got to break that right now and just be that person.
I could not agree with you more. I think we live, or we have been conditioned to think in a complete paradigm of permissioning. Are you allowed to do something? Should you do something? Your dad did this. Shouldn't you follow in his footsteps? And all these things. And we learn from you and other people who've gone down the creative path that it's hard as it is, right? Going into acting, the odds, this success, so many things are outside of your control. And so, why give yourself even more obstacles? In a perfect case scenario, it's hard as it is. So I think I commend you. I think it's awesome. It's risky as hell, right? And at least it seems like every time you've gone all in on yourself, it's worked out moderately, so that it's not, you never had to start from zero. But what I'm hearing is you're completely okay with the idea of starting from zero because the risk was worth it. And you don't actually start at zero because you have all your experiences and your lessons and the friends and all these things that, why? I guess short answer is focus on what you can control, and that's your actions, your risk. Let everything else go and let it happen however it may happen, and just be okay with that decision, because we have to live with ourselves for the rest of our lives. And I think that is an amazing lesson, not just in acting and creativity, but in business, just in life. Life is short, and then life can throw really, really messed up, funny things at you. Um, which I guess is a perfect segue to talk about what's happening now in the world. Um, it's April 10th. We're in the middle of dealing with COVID-19 across the world, particularly where I am in LA, and a lot of our listeners are here too. Um, we don't know where the end of the tunnel is. We don't, and I think that not knowing is scary, is enough. But we're dealing with sort of this pandemic from three different fronts. Obviously, from a healthcare perspective, we are scared for our friends, for our healthcare worker friends, for essential workers. The economy is getting shifted. In the entertainment space, projects aren't being started. Film sets are non-essential, so they're shutting down. Sure, people are consuming a bucket load of content on Netflix, but who's creating that stuff right now to backfill it once enough time passes? And then perhaps most home, or most hitting home for us, people that look like me and you, is this racism that is encouraged, I dare say, or at least condoned by people with large platforms that whose job it is to actually protect and represent all of us. That's not happening. Um, Did racism just come out of its shell 3 weeks ago? Of course not. You've dealt with it, I've dealt with it, but it just seems to have been encouraged and almost cheerled um, from a part of society that is really, really unfortunate. So, share with us about the Watch the Hate campaign. How did you get involved, and what are some things that were new to you or eye opening to you in the process of getting involved with it?
So the Wash the Hate campaign, I mean, it's a collective of people who are we're just trying to spread awareness. I mean, we had so many discussions, and there's so many different groups of people that like had ideas of what to do. And the Watch the Hate campaign honestly was the first one that was well organized. That came together with people like Ty, uh, Ludi Liao, a bunch of like prominent actors, to say, hey, let's just spread awareness about what's going on, but let's focus more on what we can do. Let's wash our hands. Let's stay hygienic and not spread the things. But at the end of the day, like I feel like it's a very small subset of people that is gonna be doing the stuff that we're not okay with,
Right.
right? And this message isn't really gonna reach them in the way that we hope. I think what this does is it reminds us all, like, I'm in a bubble. I mean, I'm not leaving my house. I'm definitely in my house's bubble. Everyone should be staying home for one. So if you're staying home, you're not gonna be dealing with a lot of that
Sure.
stuff anyway. But certainly being in Los Angeles, like I'm absolutely in a very liberal, progressive bubble. And so I'm not really subjected to that. So I think this is just like a reminder that like not everyone is as fortunate as I am. And we need support. We need our allies to be allies at this moment, because there's definitely a lot of people that are suffering through this. What I'm doing on my end, because this is all I can really do apart from telling the people who are already doing the things. I My fight is on representation. So the fact that film and TV and everything is kind of postponed, well, great, but I still have to write. I have to develop. I have to get those projects ready. So by the time that this thing is shut down, we can just go into production and start pumping out that thing. Because I feel like a lot of racism, a lot of xenophobia comes from people just not having that experience with people that are different than them. And honestly, part of what I kind of want to do is I want to do like a let's move to the Midwest campaign. Like let's just like go there and honestly like meet people and elbow shake hands with people, like just get to know people. Because once you start having a conversation with people, I don't know if you've ever traveled to the Midwest, but I've been in, where was it, Georgia? It was Confederate territory, and I was kind of scared. But like, you talk to the most, quote unquote racist people, and they'll be like, "Oh, well, not you, obviously. Like, you're fine." But it's like the other ones. I'm like, "But we're the same."
Yeah.
I'm like, "I'm not all that different." Once you get to know them, they're like fine. They treat you like family. They're actually the loveliest people. But if you're not there and people are putting all these messages in their head, like then it becomes the other. And if you're not part of us, you're part of the other. Right. And so I think part of what we need to do is just start like being present, representing, and, Watch the Hate campaign is great. But I think we need more engagement. We need to show up at, like our city council meetings and stuff. I show up to all the mini grand openings that we had in my town here. Like, it's just being part of the community so that you get to know people and people get to know you. And I think that's a major thing that we haven't really had for a long time.
I think you're right. Far more present today than when you and I were growing up, right? So we're moving in the right direction. Two, it's however you can contribute, right? You don't have to
Yeah.
be A-list Hollywood megastar then to use this giant platform to say certain things. So it's however you can contribute, right? Like in your classrooms, in your boardrooms, just in the hallway when you hear something that's not right, speak up. Protect yourself, of course, and be alert. But I think it starts everywhere, and it's very, very empowering to hear uh, people like you who your fan base doesn't all think the same way that you and I do on every topic, right? So
Right.
your agent or your PR person might just warn you or give you a nudge saying, look, don't politicize this, they might say, right? Like, you are risking a person, your fan base, to make a statement. But at the end of the day, you have a platform. You're not going to change the way you look. And so for people like you and other folks who are leveraging their platforms, fully knowing the risk of public backlash and, hateful DMs and all these crazy stuff that happens, unfortunately, I think it's super awesome because there is a large percentage of your fan base who is your fan, yes, because of the acting and yes, because of the talent, but very much so because of who you are and the fact that they can see somebody in Osric, in Kevin, that they didn't know that they wanted in their lives. And the other part of all of this, we can do the right things, but um, I'm not taking any credit for what I'm doing here. There were so many trailblazers and so many fellow friends and colleagues who are doing the part two of then spreading the message, right? We need to put a giant magnifying glass, a giant spotlight, whatever it is, on those folks who are doing the right thing in whatever world they exist in, because that's not what we're trying to do. What we're actually trying to do is to use that person's action to then inspire 1,000 more of those people to do the right thing. Because if you know that you're not alone, it empowers you to say no, to call somebody out, to say no to a typecasted role, no matter how good the money is, because you know that you taking that and you playing that role is not good for everybody else. And so you don't need to be your name on a Hollywood building producer to greenlight certain films and not whatever, right? It starts with all of us. So it's very, very cool. It's been empowering, hate is a virus. Wash their hands. Wash the hate. There's so many movements that are happening, and at the when people have felt powerless initially because we are physically stuck at home, I think to open our digital world, our digital doors, and say, hey, we're still here. And I think you mentioned, and I feel the same way, that a lot of folks are not going out to risk ourselves of actual verbal attacks, but these things are also happening online. So there's a lot of, that's the unfortunate part of all this, right? So my kids are young enough where, they don't go to preschool, they don't see their friends, but there are millions, high school students, college students, young people, who might be getting bullied online because it's unfortunate. So to have you and other folks uh, use your platform for good, and to let people know how to respond, what we can do to protect everybody, I think is very, very cool, man. It's yeah, it's thank you for doing all you're doing.
I mean, I think it goes back to what you're saying. Like, we just have to do what we can. I have a platform, so I got to use it. You know, not everyone has that platform, but you guys have other things. Like my mom does one of my favorite things. She loves fruit, and whenever she goes and buys like oranges, she'll go to a farm and she'll buy like crates and crates of oranges, and then she'll just bag up a couple of them and just hand them out to neighbors.
Hmm.
And what she does essentially is start this gifting cycle because people will give something back to her, like, here's a pumpkin, and she just makes friends that way because she's a super social person. And that's like how she's kind of brought the community together, for her. And I've actually really enjoyed doing that. So like thinking of ways of doing that, but for a bigger community. um, I like that's my goal. Like I would love to do that with every community, but like online. So now,
As you're working on behind the scenes stuff, production planning, and strategizing about your future, what are you most excited about for you in the next couple years?
I I think as I kind of grow into myself as an artist, as a storyteller. I'm most excited to just tell stories and help other people do the same. So when I produced my first feature film, it was very empowering. It showed me a lot. I mean, it taught me a lot, but it certainly taught me that I knew a lot more than I thought I did. And I loved being able to like hire people and employ people, and that was really cool. And then at some point I realized like I have a lot of friends and it's actually impossible for me to hire all of my friends. Just by the numbers, it doesn't add up. So I'm like, okay, well, the next best thing then is for me to crack this nut and then teach someone else how to do it. So if I can start my own industry and I can help someone else start an industry and someone else start an industry, like then exponentially I will be creating jobs for the community. And I will be, and then it's just about storytelling. Like we all have stories to tell. I have stories to tell. I know a lot of people have stories that I could never possibly tell. So I just have to be in a position where I want to be able to not only tell my stories but help other people do the same. And I think it's very possible for me to get to that point. I'm always working towards that every day, especially now. There are no events to kind of distract me, so I'm just sitting down writing stories and thinking about ways where I can do that. And so I think it's very exciting to kind of take hold of this problem and be a big part of solving it. Because I want to increase the size of a pie and I want to hand out more slices to everyone, essentially.
I increasing the size of the pie is my mantra. Shrink my slice. I don't care if we grow the pie. My net size will get bigger, right? And
Yeah.
everybody can have a smaller slice, and we can all eat for the rest of our lives. Osric, I want to thank you for coming on the show, and the way we end all our shows is going back to the title of the show, Dear Asian Americans. It really was inspired, obviously, by my lived in experience of not seeing enough of us, than not knowing enough about the cool things that the limited amount of us were doing, but always wishing that we had more people sharing their stories, as you just mentioned. And so it is in the form of a love letter to us, from us, for us, and by us. So if you would help us close out the show and finish the letter, Dear Asian Americans.
I know that we all have super high standards. This was brought to us by our parents and probably pushing us through school. I mean, not all of us did it, but we all have very high standards. But we're also very, very new at the arts. And so the arts, and this is the world I'm in, is art, but it's also very much culture, right? So when you ask me who I am, what I am, I'm of Chinese descent. My mom's Malaysian, but she's Malaysian Chinese. That is my heritage. My culture is very much North American. Now, what does that mean? Right? It means a lot of things, but it's mostly what we see and hear through the media. So rather than just pushing my heritage towards that, like I want to infuse part of my culture. I want to make my culture part of my, like I want to make my heritage part of my culture. And so if we're putting our culture into the art, we're actually very new at the art. And because we have such high standards from everything else, it's really easy for us to knock each other down. And I want us all to remember that we have to be able to fail in order to succeed. So we have to support ourselves. And it's really hard sometimes because, my friend is going to make some film and it isn't as good as Steven Spielberg makes it. But you know what? We need like 100 crappy short films for one good Steven Spielberg movie, at least. And if we can't support all of those crappy art projects that we're making, we're never going to get there. And so this is where it's tough. I think we're getting close. We have a lot of incredibly talented people, but we still have a lot of mistakes before we get to that major success. We have a couple, but we need more. And so what we need to do as a community is really start supporting each other with our wallets if we can, with our eyeballs, with our time. Like we have to support the arts. And when you see someone with a passion who has a vision, they might not execute it in that perfect way, but if you can see that potential, please give them your time, give them your patience, and I promise you they will get there, and they won't be able to do it without our help. So I have to remind everyone that we have to hold that standard for ourselves, but we also have to give ourselves the time to get there, and our community. That's really what I want to say to the Asian Americans out there.
That's beautiful, man. I think, we often joke, like we did earlier in the conversation, you're not, you're a nobody until the newspaper writes about you in your native tongue, right? And you're not, happens in business too, Entrepreneurs are terrible until they have the big thing, and then everybody wants to be your best friend. But not only is it more necessary, it's more meaningful for you to reach out to a friend in the struggle because they'll remember that. It's far more important to give somebody their first purchase off of a really terribly designed website than to ask
Mm,
for free samples once they've gone public. Um,
that's right.
and
Everyone has the need to be an angel investor right now.
of course, but in your own tiny little way, $5,
Exactly.
$10, and it doesn't even need to require money, right? It's watch that video, listen to their song, give them feedback on a design thing, or hire them if you have the means to, commission a project of any sort. So, in whatever way, shape, or form, I think, this is, we need to be the first ones to support each other. Um, it's not the only way to survive. I think it's the best way to thrive because you're going to shorten a lot of cycles there and to get the feedback and to get the validation that you need. Um, and success is defined in so many different ways. And if our friends, if our younger brothers and sisters dare to dream to create their own world, is it not then our responsibility to help them, give them, or help by giving them the best chance of success? So I think your words are beautiful, Osric. Be well. I hope you create something wild and amazing during this slight downtime in our lives. And until the day we can celebrate you on big, small, medium-sized screen, however that way comes, and to really celebrate you in person. I can't wait. Thank you for making time for us. Thank you for everything that you're doing, and in the literal sense of how you started in this career, go kick some ass.
Thanks, Jerry. I really appreciate that.
Thanks. I'll see you soon, man.
All right, sounds good.